Is Anyone Home on Elm Street? Published story by Listen Lit Hub. Chapter 1. Shadows Creeping In. The houses on Elm Street sat regally under the summer sun, bathed in a deceptive serenity. Green lawns stretched like manicured carpets, adorned with vibrant flower beds. White picket fences gleamed, and children's laughter drifted on the warm breeze. It was a picture of suburban idyll, untouched by the troubles of the outside world. Yet, for Maya, a creeping unease gnawed at the edges of this picture-perfect scene. She had moved to Elm Street only a month ago, a fresh start after a messy divorce. Quaint charm of the street had initially drawn her in, but lately, shadows seemed to cling to its corners, whispers flitting on the wind, carrying a disquieting undercurrent. It started, subtly flickering lights in empty houses, glimpses of fleeting figures disappearing down shady lanes, an unexplainable chill that settled over the street at dusk. Today, the unease blossomed into full-blown fear. Her beloved golden retriever, Bailey, had vanished. 1 minute, he was chasing butterflies in the backyard. The next, he was gone, only a faint jingle of his collar tag echoing in the stillness. Panic gnawed at Maya's insides as she retraced his steps, calling his name until her voice rasped. No joyful bark answered, only the mocking whisper of the wind rustling through the leaves. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. Elm Street, previously vibrant, took on an ominous air. Shadows stretched like grasping claws, swallowing sidewalks whole. Gaslights flickered nervously, casting dancing patterns on the deserted street. As dusk deepened, the whispers around Maya intensified, taking on a tangible form. A creaking porch swing, abandoned for years, seemed to sigh in the breeze. A loose pane of glass in a boarded-up house rattled eerily like chattering teeth. Driven by a desperate hope, Maya ventured deeper into the maze of Elm Street. The houses, once welcoming, now loomed like silent sentinels, their windows dark and watchful. A rusty swing set in an overgrown yard swayed back and forth in the wind, propelled by an unseen hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each footstep echoing in the oppressive silence. Then, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A flash of white, disappearing into the skeletal remains of an old willow tree at the end of the street. Hope flared bright within her, and she stumbled forward, ignoring the prickling fear on her skin. The air of a willow pulsed with a strange energy, sending shivers down her spine. As she rounded the gnarled trunk, the sight that met her eyes made her blood run cold. Bailey, her beloved companion, lay lifeless at the base of the tree, his once vibrant fur dull and matted. But it wasn't the sight of his death that chilled Maya to the bone. It was the unnatural silence in which he lay, untouched by the wind, bathed in an icy pool of moonlight that seemed to emanate from nowhere. The whispers around her crescendoed into a chilling chorus, the shadows writhing into menacing shapes, pressing in on her from all sides. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes, but she refused to give in to the terror. She scooped Bailey into her arms, his limp form a chilling testament to the darkness that had claimed him. As she turned to flee, a low, guttural growl ripped through the night, sending a fresh wave of icy fear crashing over her. In the moonlight, she saw it, a hulking figure emerging from the shadows of the willow, its eyes gleaming with malevolent hunger. Maya stumbled back, adrenaline thrumming through her veins. The idyllic facade of Elm Street had shattered, revealing a monstrous secret lurking beneath its veneer. This was no longer a picturesque haven, but a chilling stage for a nightmare unfolding. And she, unwittingly, was trapped in the heart of it. With a primal scream, Maya turned and ran, the chilling cackle of the unseen entity echoing in her wake. The once familiar street was now a labyrinth of shadows, every twist and turn leading deeper into the darkness. And as she sprinted for her life, one horrifying question pounded in her head: was anyone truly home on Elm Street? Chapter 2: Whispers in the Wind. Sunlight painted golden stripes across the dusty floorboards of Maya's attic. It was a stark contrast to the nightmare that clung to her like cobwebs. Sleep had been a fleeting visitor since Bailey's disappearance, her dreams haunted by the chilling growl and the unearthly moonlight under the willow. Fueled by grief and a desperate need for answers, Maya delved into the history of Elm Street. Tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic, she discovered a forgotten trunk, its brass hinges stiff with age. Inside, nestled among faded photographs and brittle newspaper clippings, she found a tattered diary, its yellowed pages filled with spidery handwriting. It belonged to Emily Hawthorne, a young woman who lived on Elm Street a century ago. Emily's words painted a picture of a seemingly idyllic life, then slowly revealed a growing unease, a feeling of shadows creeping in. She wrote of flickering lights, unsettling whispers carried on the wind, and strange figures glimpsed at the edge of vision. And then it began: the inexplicable disappearances, the chilling laughter echoing through the night, the suffocating fear that clung to the street like a shroud. One entry, its ink smudged with what could have been tears, sent chills down Maya's spine. Emily described a figure emerging from the shadows of the willow tree, its eyes burning with unnatural light. It spoke to her in a voice that slithered through her veins, weaving promises of power and secrets in exchange for something precious. Emily refused, and the diary abruptly ended, the last page a desperate plea for help. Hope sputtered like a dying flame in Maya's chest. Was Bailey just another victim in a cycle of horror that stretched back over a century? Was she, like Emily, destined to be drawn into the darkness? A gust of wind rattled the attic window, sending a shiver down her spine. It carried with it a whispered echo, a faint, mocking voice that chilled her blood. Maya slammed the diary shut, its worn leather cover suddenly hot against her palm. The house creaked around her, every groan and sigh magnified by her amplified fear. She couldn't stay here, not with the shadows closing in. She needed help, someone who wouldn't dismiss her as a grief-stricken widow. Her mind settled on Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived 2 houses down. A wisp of a woman with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. Mrs. Henderson had always maintained a curious distance from the other residents, keeping to herself and her sprawling garden. But Maya remembered the way Mrs. Henderson's gaze had lingered on Bailey, the faint smile that softened her usually stoic face. Maybe, just maybe, Mrs. Henderson knew something that could help Maya fight back against the darkness that had claimed her dog and threatened to consume her too. As dusk approached, casting long, menacing shadows across Elm Street, Maya steeled herself and walked towards Mrs. Henderson's house. The air crackled with anticipation, the familiar whispers now laced with a new note of urgency. With each step, the weight of Emily Hawthorne's diary pressed heavier on her heart, a morbid testament to the darkness that seemed to seep into the very fabric of the street. The door creaked open before Maya even reached it. Mrs. Henderson stood within, framed by the dim light, her eyes a fathomless black pool that seemed to hold secrets beyond time. "You've come," she said, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "Emily has led you here." Cold dread washed over Maya, but she found herself nodding, drawn in by the pull of an unseen force. The shadows on the porch danced, forming fleeting shapes that sent shivers down her spine. As she crossed the threshold, she knew with a chilling certainty that the nightmare had only just begun. Chapter 3: Secrets Unearthed. Mrs. Henderson's house was a haven of shadows and ancient dust. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by flickering oil lamps, and the air hung heavy with the scent of dried herbs and aged paper. She ushered Maya into a cluttered parlor, where books overflowed dusty shelves and cryptic symbols adorned faded tapestries. "Emily's spirit walks these halls," Mrs. Henderson rasped, her eyes burning like embers in the dim light. "She guided you here for a reason, child. To break the chain, to end the hunger that festers beneath Elm Street." Maya trembled, fear and defiance warring within her. "What hunger? What chain?" The old woman gestured to a weathered map pinned to the wall. It depicted Elm Street, not as a cheerful suburb, but as a web of ley lines, pulsating with unseen energy. A gnarled black willow tree marked the center, its roots snaking across the map like grasping claws. "Elm Street lies upon a hidden nexus," Mrs. Henderson explained, her voice a dry whisper. "A wellspring of ancient power, coveted by forces of darkness. For centuries, they have fed upon the lifeblood of the street, their whispers luring the vulnerable, the fearful, into their shadowy embrace." Emily's diary flashed in Maya's mind, the chilling echo of the dark entity's voice. A wave of nausea washed over her, but she pressed on. "Bailey, why did they take him?" Mrs. Henderson's gaze softened briefly. "He was an offering, a sacrifice to feed the darkness. But you, child, you are different. You hold the key to breaking the cycle, if you have the courage." Courage felt like a fragile ember in Maya's chest, easily extinguished by the overwhelming fear. But looking at Mrs. Henderson's unwavering eyes, she saw a flicker of hope. This woman, shrouded in her own shrouded mysteries, seemed to believe in Maya, and that somehow gave her the strength to continue. "What do I do?" Maya's voice cracked, but it held a steely resolve. The old woman pointed to a worn symbol on the map, nestled within the roots of the willow tree. "The heart of shadows," she rasped. "Destroy it, and you sever the dark entity's hold on Elm Street. But beware, child, the path is fraught with peril. You will face illusions, temptations, and the very depths of your own fears." A tremor of doubt echoed through Maya. Could she, a grieving, ordinary woman, face such an unimaginable challenge? Mrs. Henderson placed a cold, wrinkled hand on hers, her touch oddly comforting. "You are not alone, child," she said, her voice laced with ancient power. "Emily's spirit walks beside you, and I myself shall guide you with all the knowledge at my disposal. Remember, fear is the weapon of the darkness. Do not yield to it, and the shadows will fall." As the first rays of dawn pierced through the heavy curtains, Mrs. Henderson handed Maya a worn leather pouch containing amulets and symbols of protection. In that moment, under the watchful gaze of forgotten spirits and ancient secrets, Maya made her choice. She would confront the darkness for Bailey, for Emily, and for the sake of Elm Street. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, the familiar street appeared eerily calm. But beneath the surface, Maya knew the shadows lurked, waiting to devour the unwary. Taking a deep breath, she slung the pouch across her shoulder and set off towards the ominous silhouette of the willow tree, her heart a drumbeat of fear and determination. The whispers swirled around her, carrying taunts and threats. But Maya pressed on, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. She was no longer just a grieving widow, but a warrior armed with a glimmer of hope, ready to fight for the soul of Elm Street. Chapter 4. Cracks in Reality. The air hung heavy with the oppressive silence of impending twilight as Maya approached the ancient willow. Its gnarled branches clawed at the sky, casting grotesque shadows that stretched across the deserted street. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but the memory of Bailey's lifeless eyes in the moonlight fueled her resolve. Clutching the worn pouch filled with Mrs. Henderson's symbols of protection, Maya stepped under the willow's weeping canopy. The air turned frigid, prickling her skin with icy needles. Whispers swirled around her, morphing into mocking voices, each a twisted echo of her deepest fears. They whispered of failure, of the futility of her defiance, of Bailey's blame for drawing the darkness to her. Tears stung Maya's eyes, but she refused to give in. She chanted a cryptic verse, whispered by Mrs. Henderson, the words ringing through the silence like a beacon of defiance. The shadows writhed, morphing into grotesque shapes, spectral hounds with glowing eyes, disembodied hands reaching from the earth, leering faces contorted in silent screams. They clawed at her, attempting to drag her into the darkness, but the protective amulets pulsed with warmth, warding off their touch. With each step, the air grew denser, the whispers louder. The world around her began to distort, buildings shifting, houses changing shape, the ground undulating beneath her feet. Reality itself seemed to bend under the willow's oppressive presence. Then, through the shifting landscape, Maya glimpsed at the heart of shadows. A swirling vortex of inky darkness pulsed at the base of the willow, emanate a palpable aura of dread. The tendrils of its power threatened to pull her in, to dissolve her very being into the abyss. Fear threatened to consume her, but Maya channeled the memory of Bailey's warm fur, his playful bark, his unconditional love. It was for him, for Emily, for the future Elm Street, that she wouldn't falter. With a roar that tore through the fabric of the nightmare, she lunged towards the heart of shadows. She reached the pulsating vortex just as a tendril of darkness lashed out, wrapping around her leg. Agony ripped through her as the entity's power tried to seep into her, to twist her very soul. But she screamed out another protective verse, the symbols on the amulets blazing with renewed force. The darkness hissed, recoiling from the light. This was it, the moment of truth. Gritting her teeth against the excruciating pain, Maya reached into the pouch and grasped a jagged stone inscribed with ancient runes. This was Mrs. Henderson's final gift, the key to severing the entity's hold. With a desperate cry, Maya plunged the stone into the heart of the swirling darkness. The air crackled with energy, the willow groaned in protest, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. For a terrifying moment, everything fell silent, suspended in the balance of power. Then, with a deafening roar, the heart of shadows burst, spewing a wave of inky tendrils that lashed out in all directions. Maya shielded her eyes, bracing for the onslaught, but it never came. The dark tendrils dissipated before they could touch her. The air cleansed, the oppressive silence shattered by the chirping of returning birds. Slowly, cautiously, Maya opened her eyes. The shadows under the willow were gone, replaced by the golden glow of the setting sun. The gnarled branches still reached for the sky, but they seemed subdued, no longer menacing. The whispering voices had quieted, replaced by the gentle breeze rustling through the leaves. Elm Street, under the soft blanket of twilight, looked almost normal. Almost. Maya knew the darkness wasn't entirely vanquished, not truly, but she had won this battle for now. She had stared into the abyss and held her ground. Her body ached, the echo of the darkness clinging to her like a tattered shroud. Yet, amidst the pain, a faint flicker of hope burned. She had found strength she never knew she possessed, a warrior born from grief and fueled by defiance. As she emerged from the shadow of the willow, the last rays of the sun kissed her face, warm and reassuring. Stepping onto the familiar path of Elm Street, Maya knew the fight was far from over. but she also knew she wasn't alone. Emily's spirit, Mrs. Henderson's guidance, and the memory of Bailey's unconditional love would walk beside her, lighting the way as she faced the shadows yet to come. Chapter 6. Shadows at Midnight. The full moon hung like a ghostly eye in the velvety sky, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on Maya's walls. Sleep was a distant dream, banished by the gnawing unease that pulsed beneath the surface of Elm Street's seemingly serene facade. The near victory under the willow had left her battered and wary, the memory of the swirling portal a chilling reminder of the darkness that still lurked. Tonight, Mrs. Henderson's cryptic words echoed in her mind. "The heart of shadows is but a tendril," she had rasped, her eyes burning with ancient wisdom. "The true source festers deeper, hidden within the labyrinthine veins of Elm Street." Armed with Mrs. Henderson's maps and cryptic symbols, Maya embarked on a clandestine mission. Under the cloak of night, she became a shadow herself, flitting through darkened alleys and deserted yards. The whispering wind seemed to guide her, leading her deeper into the hidden veins of Elm Street, past abandoned houses that pulsed with unseen energies and boarded-up windows that hinted at forgotten nightmares. Reaching a crumbling old library at the heart of the labyrinth, Maya felt a cold dread settle in her bones. The air crackled with a palpable hum, a tangible manifestation of the darkness she sought. The weathered brick walls whispered forgotten secrets, the dusty shelves holding stories of terror waiting to be unearthed. Creaking open the heavy oak doors, a wave of stale air and ancient parchment washed over her. Moonlight filtered through grimy windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like phantoms across the towering shelves. Cobwebs draped the stacks like spectral curtains, and the silence was broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a forgotten clock. Following Mrs. Henderson's cryptic map, Maya navigated the labyrinthine aisles, her lantern casting flickering shadows that played tricks on her eyes. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of dust, sent shivers down her spine. Yet, she pressed on, driven by a desperate need to understand the source of the darkness. Finally, she reached a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed by a tapestry depicting a monstrous entity with eyes like burning embers. As she stepped inside, the air grew thick with an oppressive presence, the shadows morphing into grotesque shapes that writhed on the walls. Laughter, like the grating of bones on stone, echoed through the chamber. A figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in shadows that shifted and undulated like smoke. Its voice, a rasping whisper that slithered through her veins, promised power, promised answers, promised anything that would lure her into its web. But Maya held firm. She knew the darkness's tricks, its seductive whispers, woven from stolen dreams and twisted desires. Her gaze unwavering, she chanted protective verses, the forgotten words resonating with the strength of generations. The chamber trembled, the shadows pulsing with renewed fury. The cloaked figure lunged, tendrils of darkness lashing out to ensnare her. But Maya was prepared. With a cry of defiance, she hurled a vial of sacred water at the entity, the liquid sizzling against its shadowy form. The darkness hissed and recoiled, but it wouldn't be vanquished so easily. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the library, the entity unleashed a torrent of shadows, engulfing Maya in a suffocating shroud. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a faint light flickered, emanating from a hidden alcove. Drawn by its warmth, Maya stumbled towards it, finding a dusty tome bound in leather, its pages filled with cryptic symbols. As she touched the book, a surge of energy coursed through her, words of forgotten power flooding her mind. With newfound strength, Maya channeled the light, bathing the chamber in a purifying radiance. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the brilliance. Cloaked figure thrashed, its form dissolving into wisps of inky smoke. The vortex at the chamber's heart wavered, then collapsed in on itself, leaving behind a swirling void that slowly sealed shut. The air, cleansed and vibrant, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant rustling of leaves. Dawn, like a promise whispered on the wind, approached, banishing the remnants of the night. Exhausted but victorious, Maya emerged from the library, blinking in the pale light of morning. The old building stood silent, the shadows dispelled, its secrets temporarily subdued. Elm Street, bathed in the warm glow of sunrise, seemed almost normal, almost peaceful. But Maya knew the fight was far from over. The darkness had been pushed back, but it still lurked, waiting for its chance to return. Yet, as she surveyed the street, a newfound confidence burned within her. She was no longer just a grieving widow, but a warrior sworn to protect Elm Street, fueled by the memory of Bailey and the knowledge that even in the darkest night, a flicker of light can hold. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Past. The weight of victory felt heavier than any burden Maya had ever borne. Dawn painted Elm Street in golden hues, mocking the darkness that still clung to the edges of her vision like phantoms. The echo of screams reverberated in her ears, the phantom touch of tendrils cold against her skin. Exhaustion gnawed at her, exhaustion of body and soul. Her muscles ached, her throat rasped, and sleep remained a distant dream, haunted by the whispers of the cloaked figure and the chilling laughter that clung to the air. Beside her, Mrs. Henderson sat weathered and wise, her eyes reflecting the lingering shadows. Each breath rasped with the strain of the night, a testament to the power they had faced. "The darkness sleeps," Mrs. Henderson rasped, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "But it does not dream." Maya shuddered, the words a stark reminder of the fragility of their victory. She had gazed into the abyss, witnessed the entity's malevolent heart, and knew it wouldn't stay dormant forever. In the flickering lamplight, Emily's spirit shimmered, a luminescent echo of a life cut short. The memory of her smile, her playful bark, was a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness, but it also served as a brutal reminder of the sacrifices made. Days bled into nights, filled with hushed conversations and haunted silences. Each creak of the floorboards, each flicker of candlelight, sent tremors through Maya, remnants of the nightmares that clung to the fabric of her being. Revelations emerged, unearthed from the dusty pages of the tome from the library. It spoke of an ancient pact, a bargain struck with darkness for power and immortality. Names resonated with a chilling familiarity, whispers of long-dead Elm Street residents, their souls twisted by the entity's touch. The burden of knowledge felt heavier than the shadows themselves. Each name was a face, a story lost in the darkness, a reminder of the insidious reach of the entity. It wasn't just a monster hiding in the shadows. It was woven into the very fabric of Elm Street, a cancer gnawing at its heart. As the unease lingered, a new resolve began to harden within Maya. The shadows might not be vanquished, but she wouldn't let them win. She had tasted victory, felt the power of defiance flicker within her, and she wouldn't surrender. She sought solace in the whispers of the wind, in the rustling leaves of the willow tree. Bailey's memory was a flickering candle in the darkness, his unconditional love a shield against the encroaching shadows. He wouldn't want her to cower, to yield. He would want her to fight. And fight she would. For Emily, for Bailey, for every soul touched by the darkness, Maya would stand as a sentinel, a warrior of light sworn to protect Elm Street, one flickering defiance at a time. This chapter explores the emotional and psychological impact of the encounter with the darkness on Maya and Mrs. Henderson. It reveals new information about the entity's origins and the sacrifices made, while also emphasizing the lingering unease and the need for continued vigilance. The ending builds on Maya's newfound resolve to fight and protect Elm Street, setting the stage for future challenges and potential alliances. Please let me know if you have any feedback or suggestions for this draft. I'm eager to hear your thoughts and continue working with you to develop this story further. The hush of midnight cloaked Elm Street, a fragile blanket over the remnants of Maya's daring mission. Exhausted but resolute, she returned to the attic, the weight of 1,000 unsettling discoveries etched onto her face. Mrs. Henderson sat vigil, the lamplight casting her features in sharp relief, a map of wisdom against the encroaching shadows. Maya laid out her findings, fragments of whispers gleaned from dusty archives, cryptic symbols deciphered under the spectral gaze of the moon, and hidden rituals unearthed from the pages of the ancient tome. Each piece revealed a chilling mosaic. The darkness wasn't a singular entity, but a web of intertwined malevolent forces, each with its own agenda, each tethered to Elm Street through centuries of forgotten bargains and broken promises. A cold dread settled in Maya's stomach. The victory against the cloaked figure in the library felt hollow, a temporary bandage on a festering wound. The true fight, it seemed, was far from over. It was a fight not just against shadows and whispers, but against the insidious tendrils of history, against the darkness that pulsed within the very foundation of Elm Street. As dawn bled into the sky, painting the attic in pale gold, a new thread in the web unraveled. A hidden diary, tucked away in the folds of the attic's forgotten corners, spoke of a forgotten ancestor, a young woman who had once glimpsed the darkness and fought to banish it. But her name, scrawled in elegant ink, held no recognition in Maya's memory. An unsettling testament to the secrets Elm Street kept buried close to its heart. The unease gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the weight of their newfound knowledge. Vigilance, it seemed, was the only antidote to the poison of the past. She would need allies, unwavering supporters who would stand with her against the rising tide of shadows. Mrs. Henderson's gaze, sharp as polished flint, met hers. "The fight against darkness," she rasped, her voice like winter wind rustling through dead leaves, "is a dance on the edge of a precipice. One step back, and you fall, lost to the abyss." In the silence that followed, a choice resonated. Fear, a serpent coiled around her heart, whispered retreat, a retreat into the comforting oblivion of ignorance. But a flicker of defiance, a spark ignited by Bailey's memory and Emily's spirit, burned brighter. She would not retreat, would not surrender Elm Street to the shadows. And so, Maya chose, clad in the armor of determination and armed with the whispers of the past, she stepped into the uncertain dawn. The fight, she knew, wouldn't be easy. New threats would emerge, alliances would be tested, and shadows would writhe in ever-changing forms. But as she surveyed the street bathed in the pale light of morning, a grim resolve settled in her eyes. Elm Street, despite its scars and secrets, was worth fighting for. It was her home, her responsibility, and she would stand as its sentinel, forever bound to its unfinished business, forever a warrior against the encroaching darkness. Chapter 9. A New Dawn on Elm Street. Sunlight streamed through the willow tree, dappling the attic floor in a mosaic of light and shadow. Maya traced the patterns with her fingers, a faint smile gracing her lips. The scent of freshly brewed tea mingled with the dusty aroma of old books, a comforting contrast to the memories that still danced at the edges of her mind. Life had returned to Elm Street, a hesitant waltz after the frantic tempo of the past weeks. Mrs. Henderson sat by the window, her frail form bathed in the golden light, a quiet sentinel watching over the street. Emily's spirit shimmered nearby, a silent companion, sharing Maya's moments of reflection. The scars of the ordeal remained. Sleep sometimes brought whispers of the cloaked figure and the chilling laughter that echoed in the library. But alongside the fear, a newfound strength had taken root. The weight of responsibility hadn't diminished, but it felt different now, a shared burden carried by her connection to Elm Street and its whispered secrets. She had found allies too. The shy librarian, eyes wide with newfound courage, had become a confidant, deciphering ancient texts and lending a steady hand. The gruff old shopkeeper, gruff exterior, hiding a heart of gold, offered quiet support and watchful eyes. Elm Street, it turned out, held its own heroes, ordinary people woven into the fabric of the community, ready to stand when shadows threatened. And then there was Jack. His presence, hesitant at first, had blossomed into a steady companionship. He understood the shadows that clung to Maya, the echoes of whispers, and the weight of responsibility. Together, they found solace in shared laughter, in walks beneath the willow's protective embrace, in the simple joy of rebuilding their lives brick by fragile brick. The darkness hadn't vanished. Maya knew that. The web of shadows still stretched across Elm Street, its threads hidden but ever present. But as she watched children's laughter fill the air, as sunbeams danced on the porch swing, a whisper of hope bloomed within her. Even in the face of darkness, light could prevail. It wasn't just a hope, it was a promise, etched in the resilience of the community, in the shared strength they had forged in the crucible of fear. And so, Elm Street embraced a new dawn. The scars remained, a map of hardship etched upon its heart. But beneath them, a quiet strength thrummed, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who called it home. The question lingered, like a wisp of smoke on the wind. Was anyone truly home on Elm Street, or was there always something lurking beneath the surface? But for now, Maya chose to trust the light, to cherish the fragile peace, and to face the shadows, whatever they may bring, with the unwavering support of the community she was sworn to protect. Chapter 10, Epilogue. Years had passed, time weaving its tapestry of joys and sorrows around Elm Street. Maya and Jack had built a life, a haven of laughter and warmth, nestled beneath the willow's watchful gaze. Emily's spirit, a whisper on the wind, remained forever woven into their love story. Mrs. Henderson, her spirit, a flickering candle in the darkness, had finally found peace, leaving behind a legacy of wisdom and a whisper of the secrets buried beneath Elm Street's soil. The darkness hadn't returned, not in its overt form. Yet Maya never let her guard down. The web of shadows, she knew, remained, its threads woven into the fabric of Elm Street's history. Sometimes, in the dead of night, she'd catch a glimpse of movement in the shadows, a fleeting whisper on the wind. But these glimpses were mere echoes, whispers of a threat held at bay. One moonlit night, as Elm Street slumbered beneath a blanket of stars, Maya stood guard beneath the willow, her hand nestled in Jack's. The wind rustled the leaves, a lullaby sung by generations past. She smiled, a quiet joy radiating from her eyes. Elm Street, her home, had found peace. Maybe not a permanent peace, for shadows always linger, but a peace earned, a peace cherished, a peace whispered by the leaves of the willow, a promise carried on the wind. Chapter 5, Descent into Darkness. Dawn painted Elm Street in soft pinks and golds, a fleeting promise of normalcy after the chilling events under the willow. Yet, for Maya, the shadows lingered, clinging to the corners of her vision like cobwebs. Sleep remained a distant visitor, chased away by the echoes of whispers and the chilling memory of the heart of shadows. Days blurred into nights, each sunrise and sunset marking the passage of her personal war. Maya scoured dusty archives, deciphered cryptic symbols drawn on forgotten walls, and sought guidance from Mrs. Henderson, whose wisdom seemed both endless and veiled in secrets. The darkness, though subdued, wasn't vanquished. Flickering lights returned, accompanied by unsettling glimpses of movement at the edges of her vision. Fear, like a persistent weed, threatened to choke her resolve, but she wouldn't yield. Bailey's memory, Emily's spirit, and a newfound strength fueled her to keep watch, to be the shield against the encroaching shadows. One stormy night, as the wind howled and rain lashed against the windows, the whispers intensified, morphing into a single, chilling voice. It called to her from within the storm, beckoning her to the willow, promising answers, promising an end to the nightmares. Trembling with a cocktail of fear and defiance, Maya found herself drawn to the ancient tree. Lightning split the sky, momentarily illuminating the gnarled branches that seemed to writhe in anticipation. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she pressed on, driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need to understand the threat she faced. Reaching the clearing beneath the willow, she saw it a shimmering portal pulsating with inky darkness, swirling like a gateway to oblivion. The voice echoed louder, weaving insidious promises, assuring her she could end the nightmare, find Bailey again, if only she stepped through. Doubt gnawed at her, twisting memories into alluring visions. Bailey's playful bark, Emily's comforting smile, their faces shimmering within the inky abyss. But a sliver of reason held, a whisper of Mrs. Henderson's warning. The darkness offers shadows, not truth. With a surge of defiance, Maya chanted the protective verses taught by Mrs. Henderson. The swirling portal pulsed, the voice screaming in rage as its promises turned to threats. The wind clawed at her, icy tendrils of darkness seeking to drag her in. But she stood firm, bathed in the flickering light of her courage. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the raindrops, a testament to her struggle. Then, with a final, agonizing scream, the portal collapsed, dissolving into wisps of inky smoke. The storm seemed to cower, the wind dying down to a mournful sigh. Maya collapsed on the rain-soaked earth, her body racked with sobs, the weight of the near victory pressing down on her. She had faced the darkness, peered into its heart, and emerged, battered but unbroken. As the storm receded, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, painting the sky in hopeful hues. It was a fragile victory, a temporary reprieve in a war far from over. But that morning, as Maya stood beneath the now silent willow, she felt a flicker of something new, not just fear, but a fierce determination to keep fighting, to protect Elm Street from the shadows, one flicker of defiance at a time. Though the path ahead remained shrouded in darkness, Maya wouldn't walk it alone. Bailey's spirit, Emily's guidance, and her own burning resilience would be her torch, lighting the way as she descended into the heart of the encroaching darkness, prepared to face whatever nightmares lurked within.